street-level safety in midtown Toronto, cross-border economics in Ottawa and Washington, and a big night of hockey momentum overseas all share the same theme today: pressure, and how people respond to it. And later in the brief, the Buy Canadian wave runs into a hard number that explains why your grocery cart is easier to change than Canada's biggest investment pools. In Toronto today, it stays cloudy and right around 1 degree Celsius, hovering near zero. First, Toronto police are investigating violent Islamophobic phone threats made to the Toronto Islamic Centre in Midtown, near Yonge and Davenport. Police say patrols in the area have been increased, and they're asking for tips as they work to identify whoever made the calls. One of those calls referenced the 2019 Christchurch mosque attacks and included explicit threats, according to the National Council of Canadian Muslims, which posted audio excerpts. The mosque says it's taking steps to protect congregants, including monitoring entrances during prayers. Mayor Olivia Chow condemned the threats, calling them heinous and saying the city will not tolerate hate. Also on public safety, Toronto police have made an arrest in a separate downtown gun incident. Investigators say a firearm was discharged into the air near Sherbourne and Dundas East late on February 9th, with no injuries reported. Police say a 33-year-old man was arrested February 11th and faces multiple firearms and compliance-related charges. And in Peel Region, police are still looking for a suspect after a shooting at a Brampton residence near Veterans Drive, just before 3 a.m. The victim was taken to a trauma center with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Investigators have not released a motive. Turning now to the bigger national thread that's showing up in very local ways: prices, travel plans, and investment exposure. In Washington, the U.S. House voted 219 to 211 for a resolution aimed at ending the national emergency declaration President Trump used to justify 35% tariffs on many Canadian goods. 6 Republicans joined Democrats. The key detail: this is a significant political rebuke, but it doesn't automatically end the tariffs. Here's the key point. Even if Congress votes to terminate an emergency, the president can veto, so the Senate's next step matters, and so does whether lawmakers are willing to override. The emergency declaration, first invoked in February 2025, cited cross-border fentanyl trafficking as a national security threat. It's now the legal foundation for tariffs on Canadian imports that don't qualify for CUSMA exemptions. At the same time, in a Senate Finance Committee hearing, lawmakers from both parties voiced support for CUSMA, Canada, US, Mexico, calling it a job-protecting, manufacturing-strengthening deal. But uncertainty remains because the agreement hits a mandatory review this year, and the president has suggested he may not sign a long extension. The U.S. Trade Representative also floated the possibility of separate bilateral deals instead of the current trilateral structure. The risk here is less about one vote and more about the timeline. Policy can stay in limbo while businesses make decisions anyway, on contracts, shipping, and hiring. Now, zooming back to Ontario, those same tensions are showing up at the border and on store shelves. Ontario's travel industry is reporting a sharp pullback in U.S. trips. The Travel Industry Council of Ontario says there was about a 40% drop last year in Ontario residents traveling across the U.S. border compared to the year before. Statistics Canada also tracked a 30.9% drop in Canadian vehicles crossing into the U.S. versus 2024. U.S. tourism operators are already putting numbers on it. The Adirondack Mountains Tourism Office estimates around $14 million in lost regional sales from fewer Canadian visitors. Some school groups have reportedly canceled cross-border trips, and resorts are bracing for fewer March break visits. Meanwhile, Ontario's move to remove U.S. alcohol from LCBO shelves, a directive issued in early March 2025, has had a clear downstream effect. Ontario VQA wine sales have jumped. Ontario Craft Wineries says LCBO sales of local wines made from Ontario-grown grapes are up about 83% since the U.S. products were pulled. Producers are hoping some of that behavior sticks, even if U.S. bottles eventually return. And this is where that Buy Canadian tease pays off. A new look at Canada's biggest pension funds shows the public mood and the institutional reality aren't moving in lockstep. The Canada Pension Plan is now at a record $780.7 billion in assets, and about 47% of its portfolio is invested in the United States. compared with 13% in Canada. That's roughly $366 billion in U.S. assets versus about $98 billion in Canadian assets. Collectively, the largest pension funds, the so-called Maple 8, hold about $1 trillion in U.S. assets. Why this matters locally: these funds help pay retirement benefits for millions of Canadians, including plenty of people in the GTA. And pension managers say their mandate is long-term returns, not reacting to short-term politics. CPP officials say they monitor geopolitical risks, but don't make decisions based on electoral cycles. So you can see the tension. Consumers can decide to swap brands tomorrow, but a pension portfolio built for decades doesn't pivot quickly even when politics does. A quick human-scale note inside that trend: an Ontario father, Chris Agro, has been doing a 135-day streak on social media, highlighting Canadian-made products to help shoppers spot local options. He says it's slowed down his grocery trips, but also connected him with smaller companies that want their products found. Now to sports, and we'll keep it tight. In men's hockey, the U.S. rallied past Denmark 6-3, despite an uneven start from goalie Jeremy Swayman. Denmark forced the Americans to play from behind twice, and the game stayed close into the third before the U.S. pulled away. The win leaves the U.S. 2-0 in preliminary play, and essentially locks them atop their group ahead of their final group match against Germany today, February 15th. The mid-episode takeaway: their coach Mike Sullivan framed the early setbacks, like goals called back in a previous game, as useful bumps in the road, evidence the team can absorb adversity in tournament play. In basketball, at NBA All-Star Weekend in Inglewood, rookie VJ Edgecombe was the standout in the Rising Stars tournament, earning MVP after leading Team Vince through a set-point format event that drew praise for competitiveness. And one more hockey note for Canadian fans watching the international picture: Max Pacioretty, an American who spent 11 seasons in Canada, including time with the Leafs, said the new Canadian line featuring Connor McDavid, Macklin Celebrini, and Nathan MacKinnon is, in his words, frightening even for a proud American. It's a reminder of what the next Canada-US matchup can look like when top-end talent stacks. The final piece to watch now: in the U.S., whether the Senate takes up that House resolution on the emergency declaration, and whether any real path exists to change tariff policy given veto power. In Ontario, watch whether the dip in cross-border travel persists into March break, and whether the local wine bump holds if shelves change again. That's your Daily News Bite for Sunday, February 15th. Stay steady, and we'll pick up the thread tomorrow.